it's lovely to meet you virtually and hopefully in person someday.
Yes.
But I couldn't help but see that you have an Irish second name, Clarke.
Yes.
We have a shared history, Ireland and Jamaica, you know?
Really?
Yeah. So, I'm not sure if you're aware, but back in the day, in the 16th and 17th century, there was lots of slaves brought over to Jamaica from Africa.
Right.
There was lots of Irish. There weren't slaves. They were like slaves, but they were classed differently under law to Africans. But Irish were sent over as indentured servants, which was the same as slaves, but it was for a period of time. So
Oh.
Irish were, during that time, Oliver Cromwell, who was the leader of England at the time, they invaded Ireland and they deported or murdered 20% of the population. But a lot of Irish were sent to the Caribbean to work on the sugar plantations with African slaves and the Irish. And then they mixed, a lot of the Africans and the Irish mixed. So you have a lot of places in Africa or in Jamaica that are named after Irish towns like Sligoville, Waterford, Dublin Castle, all these places. They're all Irish counties.
Wow. And I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Well, and there's an island in the Caribbean called Montserrat,
Yes.
and in Montserrat there's a video on YouTube which is very interesting. But in the people of Montserrat speak like they're from Ireland, like this. Even though they're from the Caribbean, they still have a very strong Irish accent.
Accent. Right.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Nice.
So it's interesting. And then if the Jamaican accent is probably like if you took somebody from Sierra Leone and somebody from Ireland and put them in the Caribbean, they'd probably come out with a Jamaican accent.
Anything is
Yeah,
possible, right?
exactly. But we get back to yourself, Katrin. It's a pleasure to meet you this evening, and we're podcasting. We're interviewing people from all around the world that are have been in prison, but they're involved in activism, advocacy, and interesting work. So, do you want to maybe give us your context as to where you're from, what it was like for you, and maybe just your story?
Okay, well, I am from Jamaica. I had spent some time in incarceration between 2014 and 2016. I did a total of about 16 months behind bars. It was eye-opening, to say the least. There are a lot of injustices that are, worldwide, and I can speak to living some of that firsthand. What's interesting, though, about where I was at the time, it was called the Fort Augusta Adult Correctional Center, which was the only female incarcerated facility in Jamaica. And I noticed while I was there that there was a lot of, activities and programs that the incarcerated persons were allowed to take part in terms of, education or learning a skill. So, the stigma that goes with being incarcerated. It's hard for you to find meaningful employment after reintegration because that, blacklist is out with your name, and once persons find out that you're formerly incarcerated, they kind of have this stigma against you that, you're nothing good, they don't want to hire you, they don't want to have anything to do with you. So because of that, I realized early on that I would have to find a way to be able to earn a living once I was reintegrated. So one of the things I did was to join one of the skills training class, which was to learn how to sew. So after I went back home, I started my own business in interior decorating. So I make, bed sheets and drapes and stuff like that for the home. And I also learned that there were a lot of persons that were incarcerated that their education level wasn't, you know,
Yeah.
way up there. So they had classes that they were giving at the time for remedial studies, for persons that didn't know how to read and write at all. And they also had what we call CSEC classes, which is basically high school level education, the type of exams that we take to exit high school. So I saw it as an opportunity to use my time wisely to give back. Started teaching both remedial and CSEC classes. And I can tell you that it had paid off, because once I was back in society and I went through a few jobs, you know, within the first 2 or so years. But then I settled at the company that I'm currently at, which is Stand Up for Jamaica. And they provide rehabilitation services inside correctional facilities in Kingston and St. Catherine. So in getting an opportunity to work here, I was able to go, you know, behind bars, speak with people that are incarcerated, see what their issues are, you know, how we can help them to adjust to being incarcerated and make the most of the opportunity, because even though it's seen as a sentence, being incarcerated, it all depends on how you decide to, you know, look at the situation, whether you're just going to be down and out and say, oh, you know, woe is me, I'm behind bars, I can't do anything good, or if you're going to see it as a stepping stone to what you can become in the future. So while working with Stand Up, I got another opportunity when Sandals Foundation came on board with us. They wanted to assist us in our rehabilitation efforts. So they started, you know, helping us to pay for books and stationery and payments to find teachers to teach behind bars. We already know the system, you know, in people going in, it's hard to get people approved to go inside to teach. So since we already had teachers there, what we did was to extend their hours with the help of Sandals. And then I was asked to teach. So I started teaching there in 2020. I teach accounting at CSEC level, and it has been phenomenal. It's good interacting, you know, with incarcerated persons. You can hear their stories, you know, share some of your own, give them, you know, something to look forward and hope for, because as I said, once you're incarcerated, people have you, you know, to tend to write you off and say nothing good can come of you. But knowing that I was incarcerated formerly, and them, you know, being able to share my experience with them, they can see that it's not necessarily the end all be all. You know, it's just how you decide to bounce back
And you've
after,
got
yeah, after
and
what
you've
you would call failure.
yeah, and you've got great credibility as well with the people inside,
Right.
having been in that position yourself, but now being back in there teaching gives great hope that there is life after the sentence.
Yes. Yes.
And what's it like for you? What was it like for you going back in teaching, having been in there as a prisoner previously? Like, what did that bring up for you, and how did you navigate that?
Well, the institution that I was held at, I wasn't allowed to go in to teach, but I taught them online. It was hard to navigate that, because accounting is something that is, you know, a lot of working out and writing and learning concepts, and I personally believe that it's better when you're, you know, face to face teaching that kind of subject. But where I go in face to face and teach is actually at one of our male institutions in Kingston. It A lot of persons would probably think, why would you want to go in? Why would you want to teach, incarcerated persons? There are so many different people there, people that are charged with rape and murder, and you as a female going in, aren't you scared? But to tell you the truth, I wasn't, because I saw them as humans. Just because they did something that for someone else would be, totally banishable, it doesn't make them any less human. And they already have a lot of, negativity coming against them with the fact that they're already behind bars. They have already lost their freedom. Some of the officers that they deal with on a day-to-day basis actually think that, hey, because you're behind bars, it means that you should be treated poorly. But I saw them as humans, because they are. And I saw them as persons that, if given the right opportunities, they can make changes in their lives. Because I've seen it myself, I've lived it, and I know that it can happen for other persons. So anything I can do to encourage that process, I will.
Yeah, and in terms of the practicalities of teaching online people in prison, like, do they have access to the they obviously have access to the internet in some capacity, but do they have laptops or tablets, or how does it work?
Well, for the institutions that we teach in online, we actually have several programs that are currently running online in these institutions. Our company works in collaboration with other companies and donors to actually outfit the institution with, computers or laptops or whatever. The Department of Correctional Services, which the correctional facilities fall under, which is a branch of the Ministry of National Security, they would provide the internet service. So they pay for that part of it. And then our company, in collaboration with our donors, would outfit, for laptops or, different gadgets that they would need, headphones. If they need ebooks, we provide ebooks as well. We have a partnership with a gentleman, I believe, who is in Canada that uses ebooks. Currently, in addition to the CSEC programs, we have a collaboration with the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean. That's one of our colleges here. And they actually have had several cohorts that have already gone through the process and graduated for associate degrees and degrees. So all of that is done online, and it has gone quite well. I can say I think this cohort that just started on Sunday, I believe, is cohort number 7. And for the previous cohorts, all the students, all the scholars have graduated either cum laude, magna cum laude, or sum cum laude. So they are doing very, very well, despite their circumstances.
I'm thinking now, like, in the Irish context. In Ireland, we have education in prison, but it's not to the level of a university. So you could do like one or two modules in certain prisons, but you can't like do a degree. 1 second. Excuse me. But in Irish prisons, you can get educated in prison up to a high school diploma, the equivalent of high school.
Okay.
But you can't do a degree. Now, we have a lot of universities in Ireland. We have 13 prisons in Ireland, but we don't have the infrastructure or the collaborations that other countries do. And like some of the security issues I'm hearing about, that's coming up in my head when you're speaking about your country and your context. And I'm interested in how you navigate the security issues. For example, in Ireland, they'll say, we can't give criminals, in inverted commas, we can't give criminals access to
Access.
laptops and the internet. So, like, how I'm sure they'd have similar security concerns in Jamaica. So, do the people in prison get to bring the laptops back to their cells? Is there Wi-Fi on the landing, or do they only have access to the computers and internet at certain periods in the classroom?
Okay, well, there are two components to why our program works as well as it does. One is that the laptops and computers are kept in a controlled environment. So there is either the computer lab or the classroom that the devices are held in. When the incarcerated persons have classes or they need to study or they need to do any assignments, then they need to go to those controlled areas. The areas are always monitored by correctional officers. And in addition to that, what we do is we noticed that there was a lot of, grumbling among the correctional officers that these persons have committed such heinous crimes, they're behind bars, and yet they get access to free education because they don't pay for these programs, right? The UCC for the associate degree program is fully funded by the UCC in terms of tuition. We pay for books and stationery.
Who's
And
the
then
UCC?
the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean.
Okay.
That's the college that we have the collaboration with.
So is that does the state provide the funds to the college?
No, no. It's fully from the college's coffers. And for the degree program, they give a subsidy. So the persons who are interested in the degree program, they pay out of pocket, like their families will pay for the program, but the UCC gives them a discount. So that's one aspect. And then because the officers were complaining about, them getting inmates or incarcerated persons getting access to free education while they have to be paying for it or their kids have to be paying for it, we realized that there was some jealousy attached. So as a result, what we did is to include the officers in the programs. So any programs that we have going on, whether it's at CSEC level or online degrees or whatever, officers are given the opportunity to participate in those programs. So with the UCC program where they have certain times that they have to be online for classes, the officer being a part of the program means that there's always someone who is there with them, who is in authority, that can monitor exactly what they're doing while they're online. And you might ask how he can do that or how she can do that being a part of the class as well. They're all in one section. It's one class, one environment, and they have assistants because there are other officers that would normally be there at the same time, because they have to focus on what they're doing. So other officers will be there to ensure that what is being done is strictly above board. They're not going behind their backs and sending maybe cryptic emails to friends or families or whatever it is. So that's how we basically try to control the environment that they're working in, and so far it has worked. They've for the most part, before the scholars are chosen, we do have a psychologist that speaks with them, to ensure that they are people that can cooperate with each other, because all their assignments are group assignments, so they have to be able to get along. They will, question them in terms of how they deal with conflict, whether or not they are good at following rules, and they look at all of these things over time while they are incarcerated. So it's not just someone who comes into the system and then we pick them and say, be a part of the program. They have to fulfill certain criteria, one of which is, following the rules and being able to cooperate with everybody else.
Yeah, so by the time somebody sits in a classroom doing a degree program in prison, they're very stable in themselves.
Right.
The likelihood of them causing any issues or trouble are minimal to zero, and
Exactly.
then there's less supervision needed. There's a lot more trust in them,
Right. Right.
and it's not just like this guy is after coming into prison. Oh, I think I'll just rock up to that course. You know, it's there's a filtering process and
Right.
an
Exactly.
assessment for readiness as well, because we don't want to be setting people up for failure if they're not ready for it and they miss the
Exactly.
opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a very interesting concept to have the officers learning alongside the people in prison. It's something I've heard of. I know you were in South Africa with the Global
Yes.
Freedom Fellows this year. I was in there last year, and one
Yes.
of the people in our group, Valdemar, he's a sociologist in Buenos Aires, in Argentina. But he set up a library while he was in prison, a prison library, and he started teaching the prisoners, and then he started then the officers started coming into the class, and the prison officers and the prisoners are sitting next to each other with the books, learning alongside each other. But it's a great way to build solidarity as well
Right.
between two people
Right.
that maybe in other prisons they might be just at loggerheads.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering then if like I'm wondering about the maybe the topics or the programs that are available, the types of courses that are on offer. Like or is it just one or two types of courses, or is there a variety?
All right, what we try to do with our programs is, as I said before, it's hard for formerly incarcerated persons to get a 9 to 5 job. You know, to just go into, say, a government office and request employment, or a private sector company. So, what we try to do, we try to build whatever their educational courses are around entrepreneurship. So anything that would assist them in running their own business, you know, being able to do their own books in the business, being able to write a good business plan, and all of that. That's what we try to focus on in our educational offerings. So the UCC program, well, for the CSEC program, it's mostly business subjects. So we teach math, English, accounting, principles of business, social studies, and human and social biology. So they kind of have a little range where CSEC
Yeah.
is concerned. With the UCC programs, they offer the associate degree and the degree in business management. So once you're a part of that program, you'll go through a wide range of, you know, different things that you might need to know if you are going to become your own boss.
So it sets you up to be an entrepreneur,
Correct. Yeah.
or maybe if you went in as a drug trafficker, you can get out and be a better drug trafficker.
Well, that all depends on you know, the route they want to take when they reintegrate. But you know, we always try to look at, you know, the positive side of things,
Of
and
course.
hope that, you know, with everything that they're learning, that they will have a change of mindset, change of behavior, and want better for themselves. Honestly,
Of
so
course. The reason I say that, tongue in cheek, because in Ireland, I said previously, you can't do a degree in Ireland. You can actually through the Open University, which is an online remote university. It's English. It's in English, so there's no Irish universities offering degree programs in Irish prisons. But you can do a remote where everything is pre-recorded, and then you get it on a USB stick and stuff like that. So, but
okay.
I've spoken to people that were in on drug trafficking charges that had been blocked from doing business degrees and accounting degrees because of the nature of the offence. So that's why I was saying that I was thinking of that as you were speaking about business management, because you're right, because if you have an issue with getting employment when you have a criminal record, the fastest way around that is to just be your own boss.
Yeah.
And are you aware of any legislation in Jamaica around spent convictions or does your criminal record last forever, or does after a period of time the convictions go from your record? Do you know anything about that?
It's not automatic. That
Okay.
much I can tell you. What the system that we have in Jamaica is that most violations can be expunged. Not all, though. I don't believe you can get murder and rape expunged. But as far as memory serves, all other convictions can be expunged. The process, though, is really tedious. As I said, I've been reintegrated since 2016. I still have not been able to get mine expunged because the protocol says that once you have spent your sentence, you have a waiting period of 7 years before you can apply. So 7 years after coming out, so I exited in 2016. My 7 year would have been 2023. And I've been trying to get it expunged since 2023. And I'm hearing all sort of, BS per se. The first time they told me that they lost the documents, I went and every time you do it, there's a fee that you have to pay, right? So first time they lost the documents, then they told me that because of the time that I submitted the document, it didn't go to the meeting or the board in time, so I had to redo it. Then in 2024, I believe, they called me to say, is this Katrian Clarke? So I said yes. So the person said to me, they're just calling to let me know that I had applied before the time, and that is why they are denying it. Yet they called all the references that I had listed to get, information on whether or not they thought that I was a good candidate for expungement. So I was saying, why bother call the references if you're gonna block the request? I didn't pay that any mind, resubmitted in April 2024. Usually they said that it takes anywhere from 6 months to a year before you get a response. And I believe I tried checking up on it maybe about 2 weeks ago. And I was told that they were still waiting on the record from the criminal record office. And I'm like, but the two locations are less than half an hour apart. Why does it take a year to get the information from the records office to go to the ministry so that the request can go to a meeting? And I wasn't given anything substantial that made sense. I was just told, if we don't get it, we have to wait. So the process is quite tedious. It takes a long time. As people usually say, I guess it's left to who you know or who knows you to get something like that expedited. But I'm trying to trust the system that it works. So I guess I just wait and see.
Yeah, in Ireland is it different. In Ireland, you have again it's 7 years like in Jamaica, but it's only for road traffic offences or public order offences.
Okay.
So if you have conviction for a stolen car or drink driving or any road traffic offence, after 7 years it will be gone from your record. Or if you've any automatically, and if you've any convictions for threatening and abusive behaviour, any public order offence, being intoxicated in a public place, the kind of minor, they'll be gone after 7 years, but everything else stays forever. Drugs convictions, theft, burglary, even minor non-violent offences will stay forever.
Wow.
Definitely drugs, all violent crimes will stay forever. But after 7 years, then it's automatic. So in Ireland, if you're going for a job, and not all jobs as well, in Ireland anyway, not all jobs do you have to declare your past.
Okay.
It's only like in certain roles where you're working with vulnerable people,
Right.
or maybe
Right.
you're working with accounts where there's money or stuff like that involved. But if you're working in, say, a supermarket, or you're working in a general operative job where you're not around vulnerable people or anything like that, or you're not handling cash, they'll have no right to ask you about your criminal record. Now, they might ask you, but you don't have to tell them. And
Okay.
but in certain jobs, then, like a lot of people with our backgrounds, they get into roles where they want to go back helping people, don't they? They feel like
Right.
they have something to give, and they want to
Right.
go back and try to make amends. So they want to, like the wounded healer, and then they are more likely then to be vetted. So the term we use in Ireland is vetted. So you get vetted through the vetting bureau. So
Right.
you put in an application, and then the employer gets a declaration of all your court appearances, your convictions, and the sentences. But after 7 years, the road traffic and the public order, they don't show up on it, but
Okay.
everything else does. But the problem then is it arrives with no context. So if you look at a sheet of paper with all the offences and sentences, it doesn't look very good for you. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
So
Yeah.
like it can be scary for an employer that maybe don't know much about you or your background, or they're not really in this sector and they don't really have the compassion or understanding to the challenges people face, or the reasons why people end up in prison. Yeah, they've made mistakes and they've been in prison, but the obstacles that they've had in their way, the challenges in their life that led them down that path, the document doesn't tell them anything about that. So that's why it's important that when they're going for that vetting, that it should be after the job interview stage. So
Right.
then when you get the list of convictions, you're after meeting the person, you get a feel for who they are. There's
Right.
context then, and then you get a chance then to advocate for yourself. Yeah, this is my past. I can't deny it. It's part of who I am. But this is all I've done in the meantime, and this is
Right.
the value I can add to your company. Because if I can come through all that difficulty in my life to be now presenting for this job, there's a lot of transferable skills that would be a benefit to your company in terms
True.
of perseverance, getting through tough times, planning, sticking to long term goals. Like these are all the things that we bring.
Right.
So before we finish up, something I want to ask you, right, is just around the prisons in Jamaica and Jamaica in general. In Ireland at the moment, we have a big problem with overcrowding in Irish prisons, and we have a big problem with lack of housing for people when they're released. What's it like in your country?
Well, there is overcrowding in Jamaica, for sure, for sure. Um, the the only female prison that we have, it houses currently maybe about 120, 140 women. I'm gonna say it's overcrowded because just because of the condition in terms of space. It's a lot of them in one area, so to me that's overcrowded. In the male institutions, that's grossly overcrowded. Currently, the institution that I teach at, Tower Street Adult Correctional, I believe there's over 1,600 persons there, and the prison was built for maybe less than half of that amount. So where you have cells that, because I mean, I remember being in South Africa visiting Robben Island and seeing the cell that Nelson Mandela was in, and I was like, well, this is a posh motel compared to what we have in Jamaica, because at least he has maybe a 8 by 10 area where he can roam around on his own. He doesn't have anybody else in there. A
Some
cell,
privacy.
yeah, privacy, space, and all of that. A cell his size in Jamaica would probably be for 3 persons. Like it's ridiculous. They're literally on top of each other, and they let me not start about the cleanliness of the area, they're not conducive for human, to live there. At least he had a toilet in the cell where he could go. They don't have that here.
What about
There's
nutrition?
none. There's no toilet facility in the cell itself. In the male institutions in Jamaica, there's no toilet, no face basin, nothing like that is in the cell itself. They have an area for shower, which is in the yard. It's open. Anyone can basically pass and see you, right? There are walls that are built up around the shower area, but the walls go as far as maybe waist high. So there's no real privacy. The conditions that they have to be living in. I mean, if you're in a cell with imagine being in a cell with 3 persons, and you have to go number 2 in the night when you're locked down. They basically have to be going in bags. They have to be going in bags and then finding a way to not have it in the cell, because if it stays in the cell, then you're gonna get a beat down. So they have to find ways of getting it out of the cell during the night and then having it discarded in the morning. So it's not very hygienic. It's not comfortable at all, and there's no privacy whatsoever. So overcrowding is saying it's overcrowded is a very minimalistic word. I think that, I've been hearing talks of the country or the government getting money to build new prisons. And frankly, I think what they should be doing is finding ways to retrofit the prisons that they already have, and, ensuring that there are proper hygienic facilities there. That's what they need to be doing, and using the money for rehabilitation rather than go and spend billions of dollars to build a new, max facility that is gonna do what? Be overcrowded in another couple of years? That doesn't make sense.
The last time I was in prison was in 2012. Between 2004 and 2012, I would have spent time going in and out for shorter sentences under 12 months related to drug addiction. But at the time, there was no sinks or wash basins or toilets in our cells either. And like that, you would have, if you had to go for a number 2, you would have to go in a bag and try squeeze it out through the mesh window, or you'd piss into a pot. And some of the cells had 6 men, some had 4 men, some had 2 men. As well, at the time, you'd have to press a buzzer at the night time, and the officer would come out and leave you out to the toilet. Or sometimes the officer just turn off the buzzer and walk past. And if you were detoxing, let's say in my case, I was addicted to heroin. So
Right.
when I go into prison at the time, I'd go into withdrawal, because when you're addicted to opiates, you
Right.
become very sick. And then when you're in a cell with other men with no water or no toilet, it's not ideal. When you're sick like that,
Yeah.
it's not ideal for anybody in the cell. You don't want to be in there even if you're not sick, because
True.
who wants to share that space? But it's different in Ireland now. That prison, they didn't retrofit that prison I was in. They built a new one next to it, and the reason they didn't retrofit it was because it was an old Victorian building. It was a couple of 100 years old, and they couldn't actually lay the pipes to put sinks and toilets and showers in the cells.
Okay.
So it didn't really, the building
sense.
wasn't really, you couldn't,
It
so
wouldn't
it
be
made more sense.
economical, right?
Yeah, and they were also under pressure from the European Commission on Human Rights to do away with slopping out, which was the term used for people going to toilet in a bucket. The slopping out. So Ireland has changed over the last few years, recent enough, but it has changed where now people have toilets in their cells and access to water basins in their cells and stuff like that. But I
Okay.
wonder, is there any, I'm sure there's human rights organisations in Jamaica lobbying for something like that.
Yeah.
I think it needs pressure on politicians, and it needs good politicians then to stand up for human rights, because people like to think that people in prison are, or that's other people from other communities, but they're a representation of all of us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're not other people, that's our brothers and sisters. You
Yeah.
know, we're all citizens of the same country, we're all human beings, and the loss of liberty is the punishment. They deserve
Yeah.
human rights
Yeah.
while the liberty is taken. And it's up for the prison to administer the sentence, not administer punishment. The courts have done the punishment, and it's up to the prison then to support the rehabilitation and reintegration afterwards. But
The sentence
just
itself is the punishment. So, I
exactly,
mean, there should be a push for rehabilitation while you're doing the sentence. Because if you have something that is productive, keeping your time occupied while you're doing your sentence, it makes for better reintegration. And one of the
absolutely,
things that I find with Jamaica is, whereas other countries may have systems in place that help with the process of reintegration, like halfway houses or stuff like that, we don't have that. We don't have that in Jamaica. So, I mean, we could be basically setting up these incarcerated persons for failure if if something like that existed, if a system like that existed where we have an area designated for persons who are going to reintegrate, and like a year or so prior to reintegration, we help them to, secure some kind of part-time jobs while they're still incarcerated, allow them, a couple hours per day to go out and earn some money. That way that they can save that for when they are reintegrated. Have them placed in halfway houses or whatever, you want to call them.
yeah,
So they have a feel of, taking their time to get back into society, and not just say, okay, your sentence is done, and throw them out on that day. It would, I think, help with recidivism,
yeah,
and it would help with, having them have a different outlook when they reintegrate. Because most persons, I believe, why people reoffend is because most of them, especially males, if they live or grow in communities that are seen as volatile, they have no choice but to join gangs and do drugs and all of these things. And if the government is not, pushing for real rehabilitation while they serve their sentence, then it just means that if they're not given an opportunity to change and they're going back into the same environments, chances are they're going to reoffend. You know? But what we found with our programs that we run, persons that take part actively in our rehabilitation programs, there is usually a 1 in 3 chance of persons reoffending. People that take part in our programs, there has been about a 70% decline in that. So it only makes sense to push more resources into rehabilitation programs. It's a win-win for the country, for the persons that are serving time, for the government. It's a win-win.
that's why our mantra is education, not incarceration.
Incarceration, exactly.
Katrian, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome, James.